joining us in the United States and right around the world. I'm Isa Soares in London, and just ahead right here on CNN Newsroom.
We are indeed a city in shock.
I haven't seen anything to this magnitude in a very, very, very long time.
This is a horrific, painful moment for the city.
I see these people every day. It's hurtful.
At least 19 dead, including 9 children, the worst apartment fire in New York in decades. We have the very latest for you. Drama in the courts. Novak Djokovic wins the visa battle and now remain in Australia. Now the ball is in the Australian government's court. Will they challenge it or back down? And trying talks. The US and Moscow meet this hour in a bid to de-escalate tensions as Russian troops build up on Ukraine's border.
Live from London, this is CNN Newsroom with Isa Soares.
Welcome to the show, everyone. It is Monday, January the 10th, and we are following the aftermath of the deadly apartment fire in New York City's Bronx neighborhood. Now, at least 19 people are dead, and that includes 9 children. The fire commissioner says 32 people were also sent to hospitals with life-threatening conditions. Residents describe the horrifying experience. Listen.
Usually, we always hear the fire alarm going off, so it's something that we're used to. So when you don't know that it's a fire, like, how would you supposed to know it's a fire before it's going off? So I received a phone call from somebody who was the third floor where the fire was at, and I looked out the back of the window, and that's where we see, like, the fire just fighting outside the window, and they had to break open the windows to let people out. I don't want to go through that experience again. It's crazy.
They said that this fire, the smoke went all the way up to the top of it.
I was really scared. Yes, I did.
It's from the very top of the building from the inside.
Minutes. I mean, it's like they don't know how to work the
And the fire was towards the bottom.
How to turn it off. It was crazy, but if some people didn't knock on the door and there was a fire, we would have stayed up in there.
Absolutely terrifying. Well, the fire broke out on
Those
Sunday
floor
morning,
heaters,
quickly
dude,
spreading
super
throughout
hot.
2 floors. And opened an apartment where the fire started sending heavy smoke throughout the building, and many people couldn't find their way out. Firefighters were on the scene within minutes and quickly began rescuing people inside.
Thank you to the men and women who went in this building. Some of these firefighters, their oxygen tanks were empty, and they still pushed through the smoke. You can't do this if you don't feel attached to the city and this community. And I really want to thank them for when their lives are the line to save lives.
Now, the mayor described the fire as one of the worst the city has seen in modern times. Officials say the building's residents are now being housed in the middle school next door, and the Red Cross is helping families get what they need. CNN's Polo
That's a tall building. A lot of people must live there.
It took only hours for fire investigators to locate what's being described as physical evidence that confirms that it was a space heater that initially started this fire that people were kind of just before noon on Sunday when that fire broke out.
Looks like a lot of
Investigators
electricity.
saying that it wasn't the flames that caused so much death and destruction, but it was the smoke. In fact, some of the pictures that you're able to see from the scene, you can actually see how that smoke was billowing out of windows, even on the top floors of the 19-story building. We now know that at least 19 people confirmed dead, and there is concern that death toll could potentially continue to rise. And we also know that many of the dead are children, simply adding to that heartbreak. And much of that heartbreak, the governor of New York actually seen firsthand as she spoke to some of those affected families.
We are
I've been to the
indeed a
Bronx.
city in
I
shock.
went to the 24-hour fitness there.
It's impossible to go into
I
that
saw
room
a rat this size of a dog.
where scores of family who are in such grief, who are in pain. To see it in a mother's eyes as I held her, who lost her entire family. It's hard to fathom what they're going through. I went table to table, helped children make rainbow meals and eat their pizza.
I think that's AOC's
And
this
let them know one thing, and the mayor and I are united in this. We will not forget you. We will not abandon you. We are here for you.
And in the days ahead, the community continues to come together. In fact, late Sunday night, we could actually see as many members of the community coming together to going into a neighboring school that was serving as a temporary shelter, making sure that those affected families had not just a warm place to stay, but also a warm home. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Philip. Well, here's what we know about the Bronx apartment building. It has 19
Same as
stories.
Polo Sandoval, and I
the
always wonder if people call him Pollo sometimes.
Third floor. Records show the building
Polo
is
and
50
Pollo,
years
Pollo
old
is just
with
2 L's and it means
150
chicken.
units. No major building violations or complaints have been reported to the city. The Bronx Borough President describes the building's residents as vibrant, made up of working class.
19 floors.
The lot of residents have lived in this building.
And 19
for a very
dead.
long
That's
time.
real
You have
strange.
generations. I met a young lady whose parents were in the building and her grandparents. And that's what we see. And we just want to assure a lot of people because there will be a concern that anyone who is an immigrant or
It's 20 wins, remember?
undocumented should not fear sharing information with us on their household information. We are not convicting anyone. We are not sharing information with ICE or any deportation agent. We're going to make sure that everyone is protected. They are safe. If they want to relocate, we will help them. If they want to return, we will also help because the goal as law president is to make sure that we heal
I have a
from
friend in
this.
Freshman who's Queens that looks like one of her
But we
buildings
also
right
know
now.
that
Maybe a little older.
dozens of families that live in this building need to return to some
Probably been
sense of
control, they probably been
normalcy.
there forever.
And that was Bronx Borough President Vanessa Gibson speaking, and we of course will continue to follow the story and bring you updates throughout right here. Now, actor and comedian Bob Saget has died. The 65-year-old star was found deceased in the Orlando area hotel room on Sunday. Authorities found no signs of foul play or drug use and say all the death was determined by a medical examiner. Saget is perhaps best remembered as a star of
I'm sorry.
Now, he played the role of widowed father, Daddy Tanner, from 1987 to 1995. During an interview last year, he explained how he landed that role.
I was doing audience warm-up for Bosom Buddies as a comedian when I lived in LA, trying to get my career going. And then Full House was an accident. I got fired from a job on CBS and was asked to be in Full House. It wasn't available. And then I got to the show. And it was made by the producers of Happy Days, which was another show. It was Tom Miller and Bob Boyette. And they made Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, all of these classic sitcoms. And so I was kind of the Richie Cunningham on Full House. Stamos was Fonzie, Dave was Ralph or Potsy.
I was following Saget
He later became
on
host of
Twitter
TV show
a few
America's
years
Funniest
ago.
Homemade Videos,
He's funny.
making his audience laugh with clips sent in for
Went to some comedy clubs in Los Angeles
CNN
and he
Brian
was
Stelter has more now. on
telling jokes. A little dirty, but they're funny.
Full House came on the air in 1987 and went on for 8 years and then continued on for many years thereafter in reruns and syndication, etc. We don't have
That's way too
television
young.
shows like
They
Full
should
House
investigate
anymore
that.
that appeal to tens of millions
That's suspicious.
of people who all watch at the same time. And that created a type of success and fame.
And why did he give a link to his website and his website doesn't exist?
Astonishingly rare in the entertainment world.
Brian Stelter there was
That's his
Saget's
last
star on
tweet.
Full House. John Stamos remember Saget in this tweet. I am broken, I am gutted, I am in complete and utter shock. I will never ever have another friend like him. I love you so much, Bobby. Another co-star from Full House, Hannah Cameron Bure, tweeted, I don't know what to say. I have no words. Bob was one of the best human beings I've ever known in my life. I love him so much.
He went and told jokes at a comedy club and then went to Orlando.
Devastating news about Bob
It was near
Saget today.
Jacksonville.
Great ABC with his presence
So
in
we
2
thought
shows, Full
so we
House
traveled
and
to
America's
that
Funniest
hotel
Home
and then
Videos, making us laugh
It's Carlton
and smile
and
1,000 times over. Hard to accept that someone so full of life
found him
is
dead
gone.
at 4 o'clock.
Was the story of the story and bring it all to now to another top story today. The world's top men's tennis player has won a legal battle in an Australian court. A judge in Melbourne overturned the cancellation of
He said there's no evidence of drugs or
and
foul play.
ordered him to be released from immigration detention. The ruling comes 1 week before the head pitch and just days after Djokovic's visa was cancelled on arriving from Australia, remember.
So if that's
At
true,
that time, authorities determined he did
we
not
can rule
qualify
out a
for
few
medical
things.
exemption. from the country to prove the vaccination requirement for entry. CNN Sports covering all the developments. Phil Black is standing by in Melbourne, Australia, and CNN More Sport catches now is joining us from Atlanta. Phil, let me start with you. This is a significant win for Djokovic, but I'm not sure the government will like it much. Will they challenge it, or will the government back down here, Phil?
Well, the government won't like it, Isa, and yes, they may do. Closing moments of the court today, the government's lawyer said Immigration Minister Alex Borg would consider whether or not to use his personal power to essentially unilaterally cancel the visa. And it was noted in the court, in those final moments, that that was a pretty serious thing, because it would also come with a 3-year ban on entering the country. That would have a big impact on Novak Djokovic's ability to return to Australia in successive years in order to compete in the Australian Open. So a potential escalation is still very much possible, and we wait with some anticipation to see precisely what the Australian government's reaction is to the extraordinary developments in this court today. The court has effectively released a whole bunch of documents following this case today, including an affidavit sworn, given to
kind of like the state gave him approval for his vaccination status,
essentially his account,
and then the feds said, no, we're not accepting that.
We knew from his lawyers,
and then they took it to court, and then he won.
Or he underwent a test that resulted in a positive result on December the 16th last year. In this affidavit, it is to confirm
there's a woman who's got to be the same thing, I think.
On December
or maybe that ruling appeals.
It's important because something that we've been talking about in recent days, there are social media posts which show
I guess it was even more. They just showed and played some games, and then they figured out that she kind of had the same deal that he did, and they said, no, you're out here too.
Seemingly showing no
she does not have a Twitter account
from anybody. So it is one of those things that regardless of how the issue of his visa continues to play out, you're going to face questions about this. You would expect in the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, many more questions, and if the government does pursue it, perhaps the sort of questions they shall be asking. Patrick, we go to you. There was so much stake, of course, for Djokovic in this tournament. Now the preparations, of course, begin if the Australian government doesn't go any further with this. And I suspect, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that this may fire him up.
I think so. 1 week today, he's going to the Australian Open start. Yeah, he's looking to win it for a 10th time. He's looking to win Grand Slam title number 21. And if he does do that, he'll become the most decorated and successful male tennis player in history in terms of Grand Slam titles. But you know, it's going to be very interesting because we've never seen anything like this before. I would doubt Djokovic has ever been anything like this before. What toll will it take on him? You've got to factor in the mental anguish as well he's been through. You can't prepare, I would imagine, for anything like this at all. And it's going to be very interesting to see, you know, he is an elite athlete, his preparations are all finely tuned. Well, those meticulous preparations, he has been absolutely, completely derailed over the course of the last few days since he set foot on Australian soil. So it's going to be fascinating to see how it all pans out. However, if there is someone who can rise to the challenge, assuming he does get to play, and again, we're still watching that one very carefully, it is that man Djokovic. He is absolutely determination personified. He is driven by history. He wants number 21, and he wants it as soon as possible in Australia.
Yeah, I would like to see what sort of treatment he can get from Melbournians, of course, if he does go ahead and play, because the mood is incredibly sour at the moment. Patrick Dock from Atlanta, Phil Black, thank you to you both. Now, talks between US and Russia are underway in Switzerland over Ukraine. Real-life peace in Geneva NPS, that is coming up. Plus, the impact of the Omicron variant on children in the US. We'll see how it's disrupting the return to the classroom and sending the youngest kids to the hospital. You are watching.
It's the varmist.
With high rents ahead of the
That's the left, this is the
2022
right.
year as Republicans look to retake the House.
In 2010, when we won the majority, 17 Democrats retired, already 25. I expect that number to be up to over 30 Democrat retirements because they see what the future holds and they see what the numbers. We want to earn enough that we have a governing majority. That means getting in the realm of 20 and higher. If we were fortunate enough to win 35 Republican seats, that would be the largest Republican majority in more than 100 years.
Same thing I'll tell you, don't let the door hit you with a good Lord split you. Find younger, more qualified candidates and they'll win.
Let's head to the NFL now, and a wild way to end the regular season. Watch this. The Las Vegas Raiders clinching their spot in the playoffs with a wild Sunday night victory over the Los Angeles Chargers. Daniel Carlson securing the Raiders playoff bid with a last-second field goal in OT. Also on the West Coast, the San Francisco 49ers securing their spot in the postseason with an overtime.
What are the goals of our public health program?
This telescope commercial is always so goofy. Man, it's nice to spend time with somebody looking at stuff through a telescope, but you can't see anything remarkable in a little telescope. And they act like they're like enlightened to sell drugs. And Buvica. No idea what kind of drug that is.
A dire warning from experts on the U.S. healthcare system. New data from the Department of Health and Human Services show nearly a quarter of hospitals have critical staffing shortage.
Probably because they probably make the people go home for a month after they get sick with COVID, even though they probably don't even show any symptoms.
Healthcare workers get sick with COVID themselves. The explosion of the highly contagious Omicron variant has caused hospitalizations, you can see there, to near record levels. And admissions among children are also at record levels, especially kids under 5 years old who are still too young, of course, to be vaccinated.
I guess there's two things right now that are kind of interesting. One
Here's what I can tell you about our pediatric hospital.
The number of people that, I'm not going to listen to Walensky right this second, but there's two things. One is the number of people that go to the hospital for something else and find out while they're in the hospital that they also have COVID or the coronavirus, whatever you want to call it. And then the other thing is how many people out of the total number died with or because of coronavirus. Whether it's just because of it or just they died with it.
We're seeing really playing out all over the United States. as parents and educators grapple with what's the best
didn't know the
interest
numbers.
of school children as well as teachers. CNN's Nadia
Acted like she was going to figure it out or let us know.
So here in Georgia, the Atlanta Public School District will be back to school starting on Monday after spending a week with remote learning. And that means mandatory testing for all teachers at least twice a week. And students can undergo testing as well as long as they have parental consent. But testing remains a big issue when it comes to school districts in Chicago and in New York City. The teachers' unions in those cities are battling with their city mayors over how to keep kids in school and do it safely. Let's take Chicago, for instance. They had 3 consecutive days last week without having any school at all. The teachers' union this weekend said they would be willing to come back for virtual teaching, meaning they would be in the classroom teaching while the students were at home remote learning. But the mayor of Chicago, along with the mayor of New York City, says they only want to see in-person learning, and here's why.
Science dictates one thing: the safest place for children is in a school building. And what we want to do is not get in the way of preventing children from coming in.
So have you been to New York City, man? This is a dangerous place. The best place for these kids. Safest place is school, man. Keep these kids in school.
In schools. And we've spent millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to make our schools safe. They are safe. We've got the data to demonstrate that. We've got to get the teachers union to get real and get serious about getting back.
See, Eric Adams used to be a cop for a lot of years in New York City, so I'm sure he knows exactly what's going on and what needs to be fixed and stuff, whether he can do it or not.
Across the country, especially when you look at the age group of those who are 5 and younger and who are not eligible to get vaccinated. That age group, we're seeing about a 48% increase in pediatric hospitalizations for 5 and younger when you look at the week of December 4th compared to the week of January 1st, and that is an alarming statistic. Nadia Romero, CNN, Atlanta. Well, meanwhile, schools in Los Angeles are battling skyrocketing cases by implementing new safety measures. The district is requiring all students and employees to show a negative COVID test before returning to campus.
My group chat, they're all testing positive for some reason. I think it's the new virus or something that's going around. Yeah, like all my group chat got positive. We always get tested in school, so I'll know. And then we always have this daily pass that we have to enter school with. And then if it doesn't come out, that means you're tested positive and we can't get in school. Honestly, it's just extra safety, so yeah, it's not that much a big of a deal.
And people in the district who test positive are now brought to setting push on campus. That will affect about 50,000 people who tested positive in the past week.
We're so grateful to all of our employees who've come back and gotten tested. As of this morning, 85% of our employees had done their baseline test, and more than 70% of students had done their baseline test. And that's allowed us, as we said, to protect staff and students on Tuesday because we caught 50,000 positive cases of COVID using those baseline tests, which means that our schools and classrooms will be significantly safer come Tuesday.
Now, the Los Angeles district hasn't had to close any of its more than 1,000 schools this. Now, some countries in Europe are imposing new rules to limit COVID spread, including Italy, where a tough restriction has just gone into effect.
There's one kid on Twitter that keeps freaking out saying there's protests all around the world constantly in these countries about the COVID crackdown, and the news hasn't really been playing too much of it. I'd say a couple times, maybe once a week or something, the news will say something about something going on. Sometimes they'll interview somebody, sometimes not. But yeah, that's not real good tight coverage. Arizona hospitals allow COVID positive staff to work.
Employees still work and take care of patients. It's not safe and it's not for the best interest of the patients, unfortunately.
And focusing on your situation for a moment, how much of a gut punch was it to basically be fired for your religion?
Yeah, it was heart-wrenching. It was devastating. The whole process of the religious exemption was beyond intrusive, and I feel like it put my religion and my faith on trial, and that's complete overreach from Mayo, and should not have happened. happen in the first place. No one should have to make
700
this
plus
choice.
Mayo Clinical just fired on the
And
vaccine
Caitlin, I
spot.
do want to point out that this past
So it's
Christmas you
Caitlin
did work,
Lock.
and you said you missed your son's first Christmas. That's a huge milestone for you and your family, and to have to work and then ultimately be let go just a few days later. What are you going to do? Are you guys going to move? Are you going to potentially go someplace that doesn't have these rules so you can keep doing what you love?
That is true. I did have to work Christmas, and it was absolutely heartbreaking. I worked Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and I couldn't be with my son for his first Christmas. And I was caring for COVID patients, and then to a week later be, pushed out the door, was just so upsetting after I've been extremely loyal to Mayo. But right now my plan is to put myself and my family first. I know that at the end of the day I am passionate about nursing, and that's not going to change. I got into nursing to care for people, and I will find a way to do that, whether that's here in state with an employer that will respect my decisions, or out of state.
It is unclear how long the healthcare system can go on like this, because it seems that their priorities are all out of whack, and good people like yourself are running into a wall here because of it. We're praying for you. We wish you the very best. People like you deserve to be doing the profession that they want to do. Caitlin Elcott, thank you for your time this morning. Time now, 26 minutes after the hour. After the resident assistants there at one university are warning that their school is being hijacked by wokeness. They're going to tell us the new mandatory training that they say they're being subjected to when we get back.
Two real weird fundamentalisms. Where people look back at these stations and go, wow. At Fox and CNN, what they broadcast and stuff. Hey, wow. Isa Soares.
Welcome back to CNN Newsroom. I'm Isa Soares. If you're just joining us, let me bring you up to date with our top stories this hour. Actor Bob Saget has died at the age of 65. He was found dead in an Orlando area hotel room on Sunday. Authorities say there were no signs of foul play or drug use. Saget, of course, was best known for his role as Danny Tanner in ABC's sitcom Full House and as a host of America's Funniest Individuals. And at least 19 people are dead, including 9 children, after a fire broke out in an apartment building in the Bronx borough of New York. Officials say a space heater sparked the fire in one of the apartments. It is the worst fire that we've seen in decades. More now on the breaking news you can follow here at CNN for about an hour or so from now. Tennis star Novak Djokovic has won a visa deal and can now remain in Australia to play in the Australian Open. Now, the ruling comes just days after Djokovic was detained, remember, in Melbourne over issues with his COVID-19 vaccination exemption. I'm joined now by Tracy Hunt in Sydney, Australia. She's the host of the Take It podcast, focusing on politics, governance, and the business of sport. Tracy, great to have you on the show. Let me get your take now on what is going to happen here. Will the government, you think, Tracy, appeal this?
Well, that is definitely something that is being considered by the Immigration Minister now. So, as we know, the original cancellation of the visa was done by Border Force at the Australian airport. That comes under the Home Affairs Minister. So the court case, as it unfolded today, was with regard to that decision being quashed, the court ordering that Novak Djokovic be released, that he have his passport and all personal items returned. But right at the end, just before the court adjourned, Counsel for Home Affairs did alert the judge to the fact that the Immigration Minister now was considering his options. Now, under a particular part of the Immigration Act, the Minister may cancel a visa held by a person if the Minister is satisfied that a ground for cancelling exists and the Minister is satisfied that it is in the public interest. So this is something that is going to be weighed up very heavily by the federal government and the Immigration Minister. And of course, this government in particular, has been very, very tight on border control, and many people in the Australian public support that position in this era of COVID and trying to keep that sickness out of this country.
And I'm sure, and you can correct me here, Tracy, I'm sure that for Prime Minister Morrison, this came perhaps as an embarrassment, given what we've been hearing from him several weeks now, given as well the fact we've got elections around the corner politically. How is this being read?
It's a very good question, and it's something that has two different answers. So if you are inside Australia and you're speaking to a domestic voting cohort with an election only months away, then this actually is the hard line.
He showed that hotel he was staying in for detainment, and it looked real.
Probably be speaking with his
I don't know what the word is. It looked like an office building.
Deciding whether they
Did
do
not look like a hotel.
exercise that right to cancel.
I wonder if they just like stuck a bed in the room. It must have been real weird and awkward staying there for a day or two, knowing that everybody just wants you to get stuck with a needle and get this vaccine. That's strange. That's what this is all about. The whole country.
In the 2 years that we've already had, now going into a third year.
It sucks too. He's actually the favorite to win. I think because somebody else was not there.
Kind of fits with that agenda. The fact that whenever border issues are raised, such as this, on the eve of election, they play well into the hands of the government. But internationally, of course, this
So now
is
it looks like he gets to compete.
it's been seen as a very heavy-handed approach, the sort of approach where the punishment
Seems
does
like
not
things are more
necessarily fit
unpredictable
the
during
crime.
COVID
The
times.
crime, of course, being that it's not a criminal act. Novak Djokovic came in here
This
on
isn't
a visa
all that unusual. At least he went through the system expeditiously and didn't take like weeks and months. He's got to play this game, obviously.
I mean, let's talk
I
about
wonder how long it would have taken if he didn't have, if he wasn't a big wig.
Australian government does pursue this further, do you think Melbournians, who, by the way, we have been reporting on the show for a very long time, the kind of restrictions that Melbournians have faced, and the fact they can see loved ones for such a long time, will they back the Prime Minister here?
Yes, most likely a majority of them will. Because from the beginning, public opinion doesn't necessarily always stem from the facts of any particular instance. And in this regard, a lot of people have the feeling, the emotion, that there was somebody being given special treatment, that Novak Djokovic was allowed to come into Australia despite not being vaccinated. And he's very publicly claimed that he was not being vaccinated. But the reason he was able to come in under very strict guidelines that they have here is that there are exemptions for those who have tested positive recently, because even the medical guidelines in Australia say that if you have tested positive, you have about a 6-month window where you have some natural immunity because of the positive nature of your test, and that vaccination is not needed within that time. But that's not something that's sat very well with the general population, and they just think there should not be any exceptions. If you don't have a COVID vaccination, you should not be allowed into the country. So that's irrespective of the rules, the regulations, the laws, that's just the emotion.
That's just the emotion. So many people made so many sacrifices. We shall see where the Australian government takes this. Tracy Holmes, I appreciate your perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Senior US and Russian diplomats are meeting this now with Ukraine high on the agenda. Now, the high-stakes talks began about 90 minutes or so ago in Switzerland. The Americans want Russia to end its troop build-up near the Ukrainian border, and the Kremlin wants guarantees Ukraine won't join NATO. The two sides already met on Sunday at a working dinner. Russia's state media quoted leading Kremlin diplomats saying things were difficult but businesslike. For his part, the US Secretary of State has downplayed expectations for these talks. His hand to speaking. CNN's Jake Tapper, have a listen.
What about having U.S. weaponry out of Poland, moving it further west? And what about moving missiles? What about limiting the scope of U.S. military exercise? Are any of those on the table?
Well, first, Jake, I don't think we're going to see any breakthroughs
sticking every
in the coming week.
bullet and missile they have in the garbage.
The Russians will do the same, both
saying it's not
directly
worth
with
it.
us
It's
at
not worth
NATO
our
and
time.
and we'll see if there are grounds for moving forward.
CNN some pilots live for us in Ukrainian capital Kiev, and Nick Robertson is in Geneva, Switzerland. Nick, let me begin with you. How much progress should we expect to come out of this meeting, given that Russia doesn't see any movement on the Ukrainian border
this as a meeting about bilateral issues between the two states rather than including things about Ukraine and including things about
They just
NATO.
want managed
That's not how
instability
Russia
because
perceives it.
then they
Russia
can
perceives the United
build up
States
the
as being a
military.
prime mover at NATO, and if they can convince the United States to change its position on what NATO has already said it won't do, but that is
justify
to deny Ukraine the right to join NATO, to roll back NATO's military expansion,
because Russia went to the edge of their property and sat there for a few days and then pulled back. So now
pretty much a non-starter.
countries around Russia can justify spending a bunch of money on the military and so can the U.S. in their opinion.
The U.S. Secretary of State,
Shit like that.
who's leading the U.S. delegation, is a very experienced negotiator for the State Department. She was heavily
So they should stop screwing around.
at a very senior level
Because there's
in
some
the
big
Iran
things that we could all take care of together.
negotiations, a few years ago. She comes to the table with the
Kind of
position
don't have a
that the
choice.
United States won't discuss Ukraine or other broader
You know what I mean?
issues
Either
that go
you
beyond
should be
the
peaceful and
United
friends, or
States'
should
direct
just fucking fight it out.
without those
Because
other
it's like
partners
frenemies,
being in
we
the
just
room,
kind of
and
like
that's
stare
not
at each
the
other
position that
and
Russia
to
comes
shake our
into
fists.
at all. She is of the view that the United States is keeping
winners that
its
we pick
allies
and our friends
completely
and
on
our
side,
enemies.
that its State Department has been
That's
very
all
clear,
bunch of shit.
laying out just how much legwork Secretary of State Anthony Blinken
Should all
has
just be
put in,
equal
the
partners.
phone calls he's made, the conversations he has had with many
US
partners in
acts like
Europe,
it's got the
including Ukraine.
moral
And that
superiority
is to
there.
show that they are
To
completely
screw whoever
lined
wants
up
to
and have a
screw.
united position that if Russia doesn't de-escalate and if it does move to invade Ukraine, there will be serious economic consequences and the potential for military consequences as well. So the positions, I think, are very different here, and therefore what to expect at the end of today? Frustration potentially on the Russian side, who already expressed concerns that they're not going to get what they want at this round of talks.
Let's go to Sam. And Sam, you know, we heard at the top of the show, we talked about the fact that Russia wants a guarantee that NATO won't expand to include Ukraine. Stoltenberg, John Stoltenberg, has already put forward more for this. But if there is an incursion by Russia, Sam, what does Ukraine want to see from NATO here?
Well, Ukraine is not a member of NATO, as you observed there, and it would like to be, because it would like to be like the Baltic states under the NATO security blanket that would have meant that if any territory was invaded by any country, there would be an automatic collective defense of that country. That's exactly what Ukraine is looking for. The Ukrainians are meeting today. Deputy Prime Minister is meeting with Jens Stoltenberg today. They will also, alongside the Georgians, who've also got some of their territory occupied by Russia, be meeting at senior military levels on Thursday. So the signalling coming from NATO is not quite membership at all, but they are putting a kind of reassuring arm around these two countries, particularly Ukraine, which is the one suffering the perception of an immediate threat from Russia. There have been signals coming from the United States and Britain and others that they will be stepping up military aid in the form of weaponry coming into Ukraine. There's even been reporting in the New York Times over the weekend of a communication between the Russians, rather from the Americans to the Russians, saying that if you do try and take any more territory, we'll be sponsoring a kind of guerrilla insurgency there. Trying to raise the spectre of the
waste of time and
Russian
money.
invasion of
The
Afghanistan,
ugliest, stupid, dumbest, most disgusting thing I've ever seen.
Afghan adventure
Attribute to
by
pride and
insurgencies. But these are very much
uselessness
in
and
the background,
wastefulness
the foreground.
and
From
fear
the
and
Ukrainian
anger.
perspective, they want to continue to pursue their right as a sovereign nation, as they say. The foreign minister tweeting today saying, let's call a spade a spade. What we want is sovereignty, and what the Russians are demanding, particularly at these talks in Geneva, is some kind of American acquiescence to roll the clock back to 1997 to effectively evacuate a lot of NATO from
spending time
Eastern
trying to
Europe.
cure death instead of
These are going to be very long diplomatic
pointing guns at people
Nick
ready to
Robertson and
hasten
Sam
death.
Kelly there. Thank you very much. Now, Kazakhstan's
assholes.
president calling the recent violent protests in the country an attempted coup.
Sometimes I forget that we're not like too many generations away from people that were just happy to wake up the next day. You know, like 100 years ago, the lifespan was shorter, a lot shorter, and people were happy just to get to the next day. And now they're expecting everybody to be like at peace with each other. It shouldn't be too much to ask.
Now, Now, according to Myanmar,
but nobody's trying. And in essence, we do have a form of peace. Some people just don't like each other very much. And they attack people from time to time.
In December, she was sentenced to 4 years on charges of incitement and breaking prison.
But there's absolutely no reason we can't enforce a ceasefire around the world right now until people stop fighting and have peace. And I have not heard Joe Biden say that.
They work to test the entire
And I think he should.
Of a large city for coronavirus. We've got the latest
So
in the live report.
some time and energy and money. If he's saying what the right thing is, he repeats himself about COVID enough times. He's get that one right.
The United States. Russia has massed 100,000 troops along its border with Ukraine. The
He has a
question
kid in the
is,
military, so
can
he's
words
gonna
now substitute for military might?
cater to the military.
Any progress that we're going to make is going to have to happen on a reciprocal basis. Nothing's happening without Europe. It's hard to see making actual progress as opposed to talking in an atmosphere of escalation with a gun to Ukraine's head.
Ukraine has said that if Russia invades, it will effectively send those troops back in body bags.
I don't need your
Let's not forget that Russian President Vladimir Putin, despite stern warnings from the West, got away with taking part.
You see, the news isn't about contingencies. The news is never about prophecies, hearsay, what might happen. That's not the news. The news is what happened, something we didn't know yesterday.
So what will get...
What's wrong with these people? Fox News just really isn't news. It's actually entertainment. It's too bad that sometimes I like the entertainment channel better than the actual CNN or MSNBC. That's their excuse in court. They've said it. They used that defense. And they've said things that aren't true. They said, well, this is... essentially said this is fiction and people aren't supposed to take us seriously or hold us accountable for the things we say because they're not true and everybody knows it's not true.
In China, with a population of nearly 14 million, is under partial lockdown. Authorities are testing everyone for COVID after multiple new infections were reported, including Omicron cases. And starting today, Italy will require super green pass to access most businesses as well as public areas. It is only available to those who are vaccinated.
Places like Italy have a gigantic incidence of smokers. They have a large percentage of the population smoke cigarettes. And they're in like terrible health. And they're all worried about this virus.
The super green pass is adding on an extra layer of security from the previous green pass before. And basically, if you go to Italy, and I was there recently, it is very strictly enforced. You have to show a barcode that includes details of your immunity status to COVID-19 or otherwise. In previous iterations of this green pass up until today, you could also, if meaning that people do have to get vaccinated, narrowing the window of opportunity for those who are stringently against vaccination, which there's a vocal minority in northeastern Italy, which, by the way, I should point out, has often been vocal about vaccinations even predating the pandemic. It's a legacy issue that Italy is having to deal with in some parts of the country, and for this reason, regional presidents have been piling on the pressure on Mario Draghi, the Prime Minister of Italy, to try and make sure that more and more Italians can get vaccinated, closing all of those loopholes. So, if you want to go into a workspace, and even if you're 50 years old now, you have to be vaccinated and show some evidence of immunity status. You can't just say that you're 48 hours plus negative in terms of a test. If you want to go to a ski resort, a restaurant, and so on and so forth, that also applies. Italy has a vaccination take-up rate now of around about 85% with these recent measures and measures to push the over 50s working age population as well to get vaccinated. Isa, that has led to a threefold increase just recently in the number of over 50s who've taken up the vaccine in Italy. So there is evidence that these measures are working, but of course, as you can imagine, they're rather divisive among Italy and beyond, and also they're getting quite a mixed reaction.
Given China's how worried is Stephen authorities
Well, you said this is a difficult question, because of how transmissible this variant has been around the world. And also, Kenji, proximity to Beijing, obviously that's where the territory is going to open. That's why it's a double whammy. And already you see them largely shut down travel between the two neighboring cities, where there usually is a large amount of commuting traffic with high-speed trains running back and forth almost every 30 minutes throughout the day. Those services have now been suspended, with Beijing authorities telling commuters from Tianjin to stay at home.
Tianjin, China, and partial lockdown due to 18 new cases.
And in Tianjin, of course, they're now adopting, by now, familiar measures we have seen authorities implement around China whenever a local outbreak emerges. That is mass testing, snap lockdowns, as well as extensive contact tracing. But other thing they've been doing is to reassure the public of the supply and
case numbers went down over the weekend. It was 800 something and 400 something. With deaths, rather. But the reporting is always bad over the weekend.
This cluster in Tianjin was detected first among school children, so there are a lot of
308 on Sunday, 671 on Saturday. But before that, during the week, it averaged about 2,000.
Domestic transmission of this variant already happening, really confirming the authorities' worst fear. And as you know, there's a growing sense of urgency and concern because we are also heading very close.
4 out of 5 days at 2,000, but apparently Monday only had around 800 something.
We shall see what happens around the Lunar New Year. Stephen Yang was in Beijing and sat in London next week Tuesday. Now, France and the US facing bitter cold weather. We'll go to the CNN Weather Centre for the forecast. Just ahead.
Bitter cold on tap for the US. I like commercials. I'm curious which parts of the country are going to be cold though, because a cold spell is coming apparently.
Aftermath of severe weather across parts of the southern United States.
Tornadoes hit Humboldt, Texas.
Louisiana as well as Texas. Experts say several tornadoes touched down in those states as well as Alabama on Sunday. Meanwhile, frigid Arctic air is in store for much of the upper Midwest and Northeast. Around 13 million people are facing wind chill threats. The latest from now from CNN's The Branch of Harris. Morning, Branch.
Good morning, Isa. This is going to be an incredibly cold event setting up across portions of not only just the Midwest, but even on into the Northeast, where temps running, get this, almost 40 degrees below average. And of course, this isn't one of the coldest times of the year across North America, but you'll notice wind chills down to 45 below zero. That is what you are going to feel when you step outside of the morning hours of Monday in northern Minnesota. Even Minneapolis could get down to around 30 to 35 below zero wind chill, and cold enough in some of these areas. Reach the threshold of calling off school. In fact, there is a policy here where the wind chills are 35 below or lower at 6 a.m. on a school day. School is typically called off. Digital age, school closures takes a lot more to cause closures nowadays, but kind of see the perspective.
Washington 21 degrees on Tuesday.
Chicago, where temperatures on Tuesday morning only 2. And seeing what is considered normal. Minneapolis, -4.
New York 16.
9. It's considered normal. So an incredible run of cold air that eventually sets up shop across portions of the Northeast. Fortunately, relatively short-lived, but still could get as cold as 35 below across interior portions of New York over the coming several days. Now, again, late January, early February, that's when we expect the coldest air in North America. Maybe we're a couple of weeks ahead of time, but look at these observations, these forecasts for the high temperatures. In Boston, only 13 on Tuesday afternoon. This is the LaGuardia forecast in New York at around 20 degrees. On Tuesday afternoon as well. The National Weather Service has a mark right around 15 for an afternoon high. Last time it was this cold in the afternoon, back in 2019. I go back about 3 years, back since 1986. That's in the afternoon.
Today's forecast high is 15 degrees.
Have only occurred on again, seems to be
City Central Park, 15
degrees across parts of the U.S.
Playoffs are now set for the National Football League after a dramatic Sunday. The regular season finale between the LA Chargers and Las Vegas Raiders went to overtime, with LA tying things up at 29 points. The end of regulation.
No love for the Chargers. I was a season. My dad was a season ticket holder, and I went all the time in San Diego.
Picking a game-winning field goal,
We had to let him go.
time expired, and that means the Chargers are eliminated from the postseason. The Raiders are on to the playoffs for the first time since 2016.
But they played in like an auxiliary stadium for a couple of years. It was pretty cheesy, and they built another one. And so
sidelined for more than 2 years after injuring his knee and fans and his teammates were on their feet cheering his comeback as he scored 17 points in 20 minutes. Thompson's Golden State Warriors held off the Cleveland 18 years, 96 to 82. And the Golden Globes, who will try to avenge this year, with no televised ceremony, no audience, and no live stream. Organisers said the scaled-down event was due to resurging COVID-19. NBC announced last year it would not broadcast this year's awards following a controversy over, if you remember, the lack of diversity. Now, among the winners announced online Sunday were Jackson Stacy's for Ted Lasso, which I love, Jim Mark, perhaps Will Smith, and King Richard, and Oh Young.
I saw about half of Ted Lasso's episodes. It's pretty good. I'm going to see the rest of the second season after the third season.
And that was for me, the Odeon and Amusement. I'm Isa Soares in London. Early start was Kristen Roman and Laura Jarrett. It's up next. Do keep in touch with me. There's all the information on your screen. I shall see you tomorrow. Do stay right here with CNN. Have a wonderful Monday.